Okay, we'll do a second session for today. We'll look into the development methodologies and project methodologies. First of all, traditional software development models. We'll go into the Agile or Scrum model. Scrum is one of several Agile methodologies. The adapted Scrum model, project organization and roles, artifacts that you produce in a Scrum team, meetings, and we'll look a little bit into Jira as a tool for project management. And I've already shown you a little bit about Confluence as a project wiki. And I'll say a little bit about the development environment. Okay, just stop me or raise your hands if you have any questions as we go along. Okay, the waterfall model, that's one of the traditional software development models. Have you heard about the waterfall model? Yeah? Yeah. You probably have. Typically, you have phases in the waterfall model. You start with maybe eliciting requirements and defining requirements. Then you go on to a design phase, designing the database, designing the architecture, designing the GUI, etc., etc. So you have a lot of documentation in start here with the requirements and the design. Then you start your implementation, your actual coding, and testing, and so on and so on. You go on to the phase verification, where you verify that you are delivering what the client actually wanted. And you go on to the maintenance phase, where you put something into production and you let it run and try to keep it up. Okay, so that's a traditional way of doing it. Have you been doing the waterfall model in projects that you have done in earlier studies on your bachelor degrees or something like that?
In my company, other teams usually use Scrums, Agiles, Waterfalls, all this stuff. Yeah. But in my concrete team, we try to avoid all these things. So I completely knew about these kind of things.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But there are several other methodologies as well. You have the spiral model, a risk-driven model where development is broken down to smaller cycles. It has things from waterfall model in it, but it's focused on doing things in cycles, and the cycles is repeating themselves. So maybe you start up with doing risk analysis. It's quite different to see this, I suppose, but risk analysis, doing or maybe doing some model on a prototype of some kind. Then you define a concept of operation of your system. You go on to the next cycle. You do another risk analysis, another prototype, still based on documentation and so on. And you define some software requirements, and you validate these requirements with your client. Another cycle, risk analysis, prototype number 3, etc., etc. Then you start designing your software, modeling your software, etc. And this repeats itself in a spiral, you see, until you get into the development phase and the maintenance or the production phase. But the spiral model has some features from the waterfall model in it, and we'll see that these cycles also can be compared to iterations that we will look into when we're talking about agile methodologies. Another framework, so to say, for for software development is the Rational Unified Process, RUP. This is more focused on the business aspect of developing systems, not the system itself, not the system development, but the phases a business goes through whenever it needs a new system or needs something implemented, and so on and so on. And there you have quite different phases, but you can compare them to system development. But as I say, it's more focused on the business side of things. You have an inception phase where you establish the business case for the system. You have an elaboration phase where you define your problem domain and you explore this problem domain. What do you want to change within our business processes? What solutions do we have, and what can we do about it, and so on and so on. You define some kind of system architecture. Maybe you make a project plan for the development of a system if you need a system to support this change in your business environment. And you do some risk analysis. That's the typical things you do in this phase. You go on to construction. Well, now we're talking about system design, programming, testing, integration, the actual development of the system that should support your business. And the last phase, the transition phase, where you deploy the system in its operating environment. So these are traditional software development models. We're going to have an agile approach to system development as we go on in this project. Do you know any agile methodologies?
Extreme programming, Scrum.
Yeah, that's two.
Yeah, you mentioned those ones.
Yeah. You also have others like Kanban and Lean and Scrumban, which is a mashup of Scrum and Kanban. So you have different approaches to Agile. So Agile is not a methodology in itself, it's more of an umbrella for several different approaches to system development. But the main thing here is to be agile. It's in the word itself. And being agile means that you're flexible, you see? You're flexible to things changing. And that's the main thing in what we're going to talk about now. The Agile Manifest, that's the basis for Agile methodologies. And it says, we are uncovering better ways of developing software by doing it and helping others do it. Through this work, we have come to value individuals and interactions, working software, customer collaboration, responding to change, process and tools, comprehensive documentation, contract negotiation, following a plan. That is, while there is value in the items on the right, we value the items on the left more. So the focus here is more on the values on the left, you see? Individuals and interactions, we'll see that in Scrum, for example, there are a lot of meeting points. You have meeting each day. You should have a meeting each day. You have retrospective meetings. You have sprint planning meetings, etc., etc. So you have a lot of meeting points where people can interact. You see? Working software. We will look into when we're developing in a Scrum methodology that we want to have some kind of working software after each sprint, after each cycle, so to say. We'll come in and go. I'll tell you more about sprints and iterations as we go. Okay? We want customer collaboration. We want tight collaboration with the client, with the product owner, as it's called in Scrum. So we want meetings with the client as much as possible, and we want to try to establish the requirements of the client throughout the whole system development or the project, throughout the whole project phase. Okay? And we want to respond to change. Okay, when we start the project, we have this set of requirements, you see? But as we go on, the requirements may change. And we want to respond to that. We want to be flexible so that we can move along as the requirements from the client change. You see? And that's the main basis of agile methodology. Scrum. It's called empirical process control. Projects are divided into sprints. I'm getting quite practical here. What features do we have in Scrum? Okay, we have projects and they are divided into sprints. And one sprint typically have a duration of 1 to 4 weeks. You can have 1 to 3 weeks, it says there. You can have 4 weeks as well. We have tried both 4 weeks and down to 3 weeks, and now we're down to 2 weeks. No, we were down to 2 weeks, and we completely jumped or we got rid of sprints altogether in my company. But in Scrum, you have sprints, and they go or set some typical interval for those sprints. Okay, we'll do 4-week sprints here between the seminars. 3 sprints of 4 weeks. And in agile methodologies, we typically call this an iteration. So when 3 weeks, let's say 4 weeks now, 4 weeks have gone, that's one iteration. In Scrum, we call it one sprint. Okay? So that's the duration of 4 weeks for the project team. Okay, at the end of a sprint, stakeholders and team meet to assess the progress and plan next steps. What's a stakeholder?
Ones who benefit from the product.
Yeah, exactly. And who are that?
The ones giving us the projects.
Clients?
The
Yeah.
clients.
Exactly. There are other stakeholders as well. Let's say you are doing a huge development or a system development project for the government of Norway, for example. Then you have some kind of regulations that you have to comply to, and so on. Then we also can call these stakeholders. Other stakeholders within your company, they're various stakeholders. Maybe you're developing one part of the system, another team is developing another part, then maybe one supervisor of some kind is a stakeholder. So there can be many.
Can, for example, the legal department be considered as a stakeholder?
Yeah, exactly. So there are any part that has some kind of interest in what's going on in see? And you're the team. So we have at the end of a sprint, stakeholders and team meet to assess the progress and plan next steps. So we start up the project or start the sprint. That's the first day of the first week. 4 weeks goes along, and then we have a meeting to assess what have we done now. Have we done as much as we planned for this sprint, and how are we going along with the project in the whole project? How are we going along according to plan? So we assess the sprint. The project's direction can then be adjusted or reoriented based on completed work, not speculation or predictions. Because you are meeting your stakeholders. You are telling your stakeholders that this is where we are now, and this is how the system is working. Will we keep the requirements that we were agreeing upon in the start of the sprints, or are there new requirements now? Okay, there are new requirements. Then we change the course a little bit. Okay? We prioritize new things, and that's what we're doing after each sprint in the Scrum methodology. Have any of you worked with Scrum in projects, in your studies or in work? Yeah. So you're quite familiar with this, some of you. Yeah. Scrum teams. They are self-organized. The team as a whole is responsible, not a project manager in the team. So you have no authority within the team. But you have, you typically have a Scrum Master, and some thinks that Scrum Master is the project manager, but it's actually not. It's the whole team manages what should be done during a sprint or should be done during the whole project. A Scrum Master is only a team facilitator, administrates things, and facilitates or organizes the meetings, and maybe has an agenda for the meetings and so on. The team itself is ruled based on democracy. How you do this ruling based on democracy is different within teams. You can do that in several different ways. Maybe some of you have heard of planning poker. No? Yeah. Yeah, that's one way to decide upon how much work one work item is, for example. So there isn't a project manager or something, no authority that says that we're using 10 hours on this and 5 hours on this. And the Scrum Master is the team facilitator. You also have other major roles. You have the product owner that represents the customer in the team. That's a representative from a client, for example. If it's an internal project, that could be a supervisor of some kind. You have team members. 5 to 9 is considered ideal, and that's including the product owner and the Scrum Master. Typically, in these projects that we are going to do now, one of the lecturers will be the product owner. Okay, so I have one project in Confluence, and I will be product owner of that project. And then within the team, you are going to organize who's going to be the Scrum Master and what are the roles of the team members. There can be several different roles, like architect, interaction designer, build master, tester, etc., or you can have several different roles within the same team. Let's say that you're a team of 5 people, maybe one person has to have several roles. For this project, it says so in the project handbook on Confluence. It says that you have to identify one Scrum Master and one Build Master, and the others are typically those roles that you need. Okay, so you have to have one Scrum Master and one Build Master. Okay. The Scrum process. As I said, there are a lot of meeting points in Scrum methodologies, and that's and the reason for that is that you want people to interact. Here is the duration of a sprint. SP on the left side there, that's the sprint planning meeting. You should hold a sprint planning meeting at the start of every sprint, where you estimate issues solved and you prioritize issues to solve in that sprint. You see? Have you heard of a backlog? Yeah, what's a backlog?
All the issues.
All the issues that you have identified for the project. Typically based on the requirements of the client, you set up tasks or issues that you want to do. These are also called work items. If you stumble upon the term work item, it's also more or less the same. Okay. So in a project, you typically, when you start it, or also during the project, you will have a huge product backlog. And that's a stack of all the issues or all the tasks that needs to be done as they are identified in the start of the project. But this product backlog could change. You can pick things out, tasks and issues, and you can push more in. And what you do in a sprint planning meeting, you take some of the tasks and issues in that product backlog and you put it into a sprint backlog. You see? And the sprint backlog, of course, can't be larger than what you can solve within your team during 4 weeks or 3 weeks if that's your sprint time. So you have a product backlog, you move some of the tasks to the sprint backlog, and that's what you're going to do during the sprint, and that's what you're planning in the sprint planning meeting. You estimate the issues to solve and you prioritize them. You effectively move them from the product backlog to the sprint backlog. And you also have daily Scrum meetings. These are quite basic meetings. Where the Scrum Master typically asks the team members, what have you done in the last, during the last day, what issues have you solved, and what are you going to do? More or less, not more than that. You see, daily Scrum meetings is, as it says, daily. For each day, each work day, of course, during the sprint. And then at the end of the sprint, you have a sprint review meeting, including maybe a sprint demo to the stakeholders to show what the software looks like at the moment. And you also have a sprint retrospective, where you assess what you have done. And did we meet our goal by solving all the issues in the sprint backlog? And so on. Okay, so if there are remaining issues in your sprint backlog, it shouldn't be, but sometimes, of course, there are, because you haven't estimated correctly, because estimation is damn hard. It's very hard. And you will experience that in your project now. Estimation is hard. Okay, so then you assess in sprint retrospective, you assess the sprint that you have been going through. Typically, you have the sprint review meeting and the sprint retrospective in the same meeting. Okay. Any questions to the meetings in Scrum?
So basically, we will have to meet, organize daily meetings every day.
Yeah. practically that has been difficult, from last year's experience. But you have to agree upon this. We also call them stand-ups. These daily scrum meetings. You have to agree upon when you're going to have your stand-ups. Preferably every day, but I know that when the teams are spread across different locations and you have other courses to attend and so on, it's quite hard to be able to do that. But if you manage it, it's the best. And these meetings should be really short, like 5-10 minutes.
So just do it over Skype,
Yeah.
for example?
Yeah.
And we will log all our meetings.
Yeah, logo over. Not the stand-ups, but the sprint planning meeting and the sprint retrospective and the sprint review. Okay.
Not the daily.
That's just to update the entire team, so everybody
Yeah.
will know.
Then if you start documenting your stand-ups as well, you'll use more than 10 minutes, I suppose. Okay, issues to be solved in a sprint. What do you do in a sprint? You have several different issues. You will see that some of these are similar in Jira as well. They use the same terms. When we start this project, your product owner will define a list of user stories. Have you heard about user stories?
Use cases.
User stories. It's one way to define requirements. Because you can, one other way to define requirements is to have a list of functional requirements, what the system should do, and non-functional requirements, like how the system should perform, like round trip time and response time, and so on. So we have some targets there. But we are going to use user stories, and this is the view of the user. They are typically described as and a role. I want to do something in order to achieve some target. Okay, so as a teacher, let's say that we are developing a system for teachers in a school or something like that. As a teacher, I want to create learning objects in order to present learning material to the students. You see? So this is how you use user stories. So you get a list of user stories from your product owner, like I'm going to define a list of user stories for my project. And then you'll take these user stories and you decompose them into tasks or issues in Jira. Okay, so then you have a product backlog. That's your product backlog. The task list or the issue list in Jira. Okay? But the user stories are the requirements. Other type of issues are epics. These are more larger stories of what is going to be solved. We need a user interface to administrate the students of the school, for example. That would mean epic. A bug, you know what is, I suppose. Improvement, and you have tasks. And these issues can have different types of severity, like it's a blocker. We need to solve this before we can go on with the project. Then it's a blocker severity of the issue. It's critical, yeah. I think you understand what that is, major, minor, and trivial. So that's severity of issues. Okay, We also have an issue workflow. And these are typical states of the issues. States of the tasks you're going to do. You will see them in Jira as well. I'm not sure if we have, I think it's 4 or 5 states for a task in Jira. We'll look at it afterwards. Here we see several different states. First of all, a task when you're creating a task, it's open. That's the base state. Okay, so maybe it's assigned to someone, or someone is assigning it to himself. Then it's in progress. The developer has implemented something that solves the task or issue. Then he puts it in review. That means that some other developer should review what the first developer has done. Okay. And then you can move it into testing. Typically in extreme programming, you'll do the test. You set up the tests before, so the system is self-tested. More or less, this is automated, so you don't have to use that state. But in other building procedures and in integration procedures, you may have to test the implementation as well. Maybe it's okay, it's verified that everything is according to what's defined in the requirement. Then you put it to done, and you can resolve maybe a bug. If the issue is a bug, you can resolve it, and you can close it if it's verified from the product owner and the Scrum Master, and if this is okay, then you close it. Scrum artifacts. These are tangible things that we produce in Scrum. Documents and these things. First of all, the product backlog. I already explained the product backlog. It was understandable, the product backlog. Yeah. And the sprint backlog, that was a part of the project backlog. That's things that we prioritize or things that are related to each other that we move into a sprint. Tasks that we prioritize for the sprint. That's the sprint backlog. An increment. Anybody of you know what an increment is in Scrum?
Is it a working piece of software that you add to the product for each sprint?
Exactly. It's what you have produced during all the sprints up until the sprint that you're in is done. So it will accumulate as you go on. It's the working software that you have afterwards. Exactly. And you also produce some system documentation. Either the system is self-documenting by annotating classes and so on, or you produce documentation of how to use the user interface as you go on. The main thing, remember this, in agile methodologies, it's focused more on getting things done, on producing something, having a work, and that's a very important point. Getting a working piece of software after each sprint. You have to remember this. If you want to remember one thing after this lecture, have a working piece of software after each sprint. Okay? So then you have to prioritize what's the main, most important thing for the stakeholders here. What's the most important thing for the product owner? It's not a login mechanism that he wants to see. He wants to see the list of ski jumpers that how they have performed in some kind of ski jumping challenge or something like that. Okay? So you have to prioritize having something up and going that you can show to your product. And it should be based on what the product owner prioritizes.
Question.
Yeah.
If we reach the end of a sprint and the product just falls apart at the last minute, what do you do then?
You show the last working copy. If you're using some kind of versioning system, for example, you typically keep your your working software on your master branch and maybe tag them with a version, so you have a version history, and then you show them the last working piece of software that you have.
Check the continuous integration system for
Sorry?
the rest of the working build.
Sorry?
Continuous integration system.
Yeah.
CI.
In CI, for example, you are typically automating your testing as you go on as well. And if you're doing testing, test-driven development or behavior-driven development, you're setting up your tests before you actually implement something. Yeah, you should. Not everyone does it. So rarely something breaks on something if you do it the right way, but it happens. Then you have to show the last working piece of software. Yes, Scrum management tools. In Scrum, you have a Scrum task board. Many teams use physical boards with post-it notes. Okay, and I'm moving these post-it notes. Moving one task, one post-it note is one task, and I'm moving it between states. So maybe it's started as unassigned, and then you assign it to something, and then it's in progress and in testing and in review, etc., etc. You see? So the columns in a Scrum board is the state of the task. Do you know what a burn down chart is? Sorry?
Progress support.
Yeah.
It's more or less the progress.
Yeah, the progress of one sprint. Yeah. So let's say that you have put 56, here you have 56 tasks in your sprint. You have your sprint planning meeting, the first day of the sprint, okay? We take these 56 tasks, we put them into the sprint backlog, and then we should estimate something like this, and we are finished with all these during the sprint. That's the main target for sprint. And as you go along, typically you have a system that registers and creates these graphs for you. In Jira, you have a burn down chart, for example. As you go along and you put issues to resolved, they will be decremented from this project backlog. So typically you want an actual graph to go more or less according to plan. You see? You decrement the amount of work that you have left, the hours of work that you have left. Okay? Sometimes you get an actual graph that goes straight to the bottom. What's happened then?
Then you underestimated how much you could have done.
Yeah, exactly. Not enough backlog items in the sprint backlog. So you're finished with all the work items before the sprint is done. And sometimes you have like a graph that goes down here or something like that. Then you have overestimated what you could have done during that sprint.
So what's the best thing to do then? Just do another task if you have more time, or just relax until the meeting?
When you're overestimating?
Let's say that you burn through the task in half the time.
Yeah. Then you put new items into the log, and then you typically get a burnout chart that goes to the rock bottom, and it suddenly jumps up to somewhere here, and it goes down. You see, because you add sprint backlog items from the product backlog. Yeah. And typically, if you have overestimated, then you have several unresolved issues or tasks at the end of sprint, and then you have to inform the product owner about that you haven't done as much as you estimated to be doing during the sprint.
Or some issues was more difficult to solve than predicted.
And that happens a lot. It does. And what's happened if you have, let's say, a graph that goes upwards during the sprint?
Issues have to be split up to more.
Yeah, you have either done a re-estimation of some of the sprint backlog items, so that they are larger than they was. Okay, we need 10 hours on this task, not 5 as we originally estimated. Or you have put more items from the product backlog into sprint backlog. You shouldn't do any of those things, but I've seen it happen in, for example, Jira. Okay, so the main target for our burn-down chart is you rarely get it correctly the first time you're working with Scrum, but the main thing is to get a graph that is more or less according to the plan or the estimation. Any questions to the burn-down charts? No? Okay, project management in Jira. Atlassian Jira is a Scrum management tool. We have a Scrum task board, we have burn-down charts, and we have an issue workflow. We will be using Jira in this project. The server that's linked to there has changed to another DNS, not that IP address. So it's dev.imt.hig.no. I will put that information out so you have it. Okay, or follow the link on Pronto, then you get the correct place. So that's invalid, but we have a Jira server. And we have our project wiki in Confluence. I see that I won't have time to do Jira in this session, but in the next session now we'll have the project presentations. So the other lecturers and the other product owners will come and introduce their projects. And after that, I'm going to hold a Git lecture, but I'll do some Jira before I start with Git. Okay? So we'll just move it. Yes. Take a 15-minute break.
Very much,